Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to talk about a couple of things from that big old FAQ that Games Workshop pushed out earlier this week. And before we get into that, I think we should take a moment to say goodbye, to say RIP to the Elysian Drop Troopers, which it looks like Forge World is just stopping support for completely. Pretty much all of their stuff has moved to last chance to buy, which is a fairly good indicator that the Elysians are going to be pretty much gone from this point onwards. There's not been any real talk of them returning at any point. I've not seen anything to suggest that they're going to be reinstated, that they're going to carry on being produced or anything like that. It kind of looks like this is the end for that particular force, which I think is a genuine shame, because as Imperial Guard regiments go, I think they had a really nice, unique flavour, and they had a very interesting look in that it's far more modern, it's far more sort of contemporary than traditional Imperial Guard, and by that I mean your standard Cadian chaps, and of course comparing them to things like the Mordenine Guard and like the Steel Legion and Death Corps of Krieg. There's a variety of styles in Imperial Guard, but the Cadians I would describe as sort of modern, but closer to more like a riot police modern than actual troops, whereas for some reason the Elysians I always felt had a very unique look for Imperial Guardsmen, and if they are actually on the way out and we're not going to see them anymore, I think that's a genuine shame. Although, to be honest, given the price of the Elysian stuff, especially given how many troops you need to play Imperial Guard and stuff like that, I can see why they may have dropped in popularity, especially when you consider the sheer amount of Solar Auxilia stuff that Forge World have done. And let's face it, people like new shit, and the Solar Auxilia are new. I've seen plenty of people using Solar Auxilia models in place of standard guardsmen, whereas I haven't seen really anything in the way of Elysian armies that recently. So it's a shame that they seem to be going. I'd quite like to see something take their place. Hopefully Forge World does focus on another Imperial Guard regiment aside from Death Corps, but I guess we'll have to see. Anyway, this big FAQ that dropped, we're not going to go through everything point by point, bit by bit, because that would take absolutely forever, and some of the stuff that is specific to certain armies, I would be daft to try and tell you whether I think that's decent or not, because I don't play those armies, and as such my opinion is mostly worthless. I mean, that's no different to usual anyway, but whatever. What we're going to have a quick chat about first up is the change to keywords, which should prevent soup. So soup is essentially basically taking bits from every kind of force and throwing them all together. A good example is Magnus and Mortarion in the same detachment, that kind of thing. There's been a change to keywords that means you shouldn't be able to do that anymore, and I have seen a few people who really don't like that change, and I have to admit, I'm on the side of those who thinks it makes things a bit more thematic. So the thing is, from my understanding, it doesn't change your ability to take kind of units from different factions in the same armies, it simply prevents you from doing it in the same detachments, which I think makes more sense. The idea of Magnus and Mortarion being in the same detachment to begin with is kind of daft, because they famously did not get along, and I really can't see Zinch and Nurgle, Zinch and Nurgle, I've got to stop saying the T at the start, kind of going, let's just have our two chosen buddies go together and ignore all the past grievances and the fact that we pretty much hate each other's guts. I don't know, I've never felt it, and it doesn't stop it on an army-wide. It doesn't stop it army-wide, it's detachment-wide from what I can tell. So, on the one hand, if you are one of those people that throws together pretty much anything and everything to make the most min-max force you possibly can, that's a change that you're not going to agree with. But for more, I guess, narrative and thematic players like myself, it's not something I would do to begin with, so it doesn't bother me that much. Although, as I say every time, just in case someone gets the wrong idea, I'm not a tournament player, so I can't cast a judgment on that side of things, only what I personally prefer. And it doesn't seem like that bad a change for me, and that's why. There's another couple of things as well, and let's cover the deep strike thing, because that one is I just don't know what to make of it. So there was a change in this FAQ whereby deep striking on turn 1 has to be within your own deployment zone, with the exception of the Genestealer cults. I can't remember what their stupid thing's called. There'll be a picture of it on the screen so you can see it. But it's easier to just sum up and say deep striking on the first turn, you must do it within your own deployment zone. You cannot do it 9 inches away from the enemy. And it's a beta rule, so it's not like kind of you have to do this now, which I think is a good thing. I think it's one of those cases where Games Workshop has identified a problem and they've attempted to fix it, but the fix is... I'm not going to say it's wrong, I'm going to say it's not quite there yet. I feel like it presents a couple of issues. The first issue is that it seems to have been designed primarily to deal with Alpha Strike armies that drop and fire as opposed to drop and charge. Now, having something deep struck near you and then that unit charging you is not great if you're playing a gunline army, but the charge range does mean that there is a chance that you won't actually get charged. That initial point of impact might not even happen. So whilst it is not particularly nice if you get smashed by Blood Angels or Grey Knights on the first turn, there is something in place that means that it may not actually take place at all. I cannot remember what the percentage chance is of a successful charge from the 9-inch range. Something in the back of my head says it's around 30%, which is not that high. Now, obviously, there are things that you can do to change that and to improve the odds, but the big focus seems to be on the tactic of dropping and shooting, having those units that are designed to basically dump themselves on the battlefield, wipe something out, and then most likely die next turn. Games Workshop seem to be sort of taking the view that isn't really that fun, it's not that interesting, it's not conducive to an interesting or enjoyable game. Whether you agree with that or not is entirely down to you, that's personal preference. I've never been a particular fan of that particular style of play, but the fact is that some armies seem to be written with that kind of thing, maybe not in mind, but it's too good not to do, it's too good to pass up, especially if you're looking at things like tournament settings. You kind of want to go for the best thing that you possibly can. I feel as though what that does, that change to deep strike, is it takes away the teeth of armies that really rely on that initial impact. I think it also kind of puts gun lines in an even stronger position than they were before. Given that shooting is pretty damn good this edition and has been for quite some time, to be fair, I don't know really whether gunline armies as a whole needed that buff. I think it's one of those things where the more I look at it and the more I read about people's examples and the more I read about people who have tested the rule, it's one of those situations where it's a fix that works for some and it's a fix that doesn't work for others. It's a kind of catch-all solution that sort of does something about the problem, but simultaneously causes some armies massive issues that they don't really have any way to recover from. Luckily, it is a beta rule, and so it's sort of up to the discretion of the people playing, or if it's a tournament situation, the tournament organisers, to whether it's enforced or not. But I think it's one of those things that it's good that it's a beta rule. It's good that it is a change that can be reversed and can be looked at again, because I just don't think it's there. I think it's sort of there, but it lacks subtlety and it lacks nuance. It lacks sort of consideration for individual cases, and instead makes a blanket ruling that I don't know is actually that effective or that balanced, really. And And the same goes actually for the other big sort of debating point that I've seen from a lot of people, which is the limit of 3 data sheets. So you can't have the same data sheet more than 3 times, is probably the way I should have phrased that. And again, that is one of those things where in certain cases I can see it being quite a positive change. I can see it making armies more interesting. I can see it make people think outside the box a little bit, try different things, as opposed to just going, here's 7 flyer and off we go. On the other hand, again, it is a limitation that blanket could apply to everything without actually taking into consideration armies that don't have that issue. It's I think that's the biggest problem I have with a good couple of these rules, is that they are blanket solutions where I don't think there's a blanket solution. They are fixes that seem to rely on everything being the same, and that's not how this game works. There are plenty of armies that really benefit from having more than 3 of the same unit. That doesn't necessarily mean that that unit is spammed or that it is too good for what it is. There are plenty of armies that could do with things like 3 HQs of the same choice, which again isn't really spam. It's the best option, or in some cases the only option. You know, there are armies with incredibly limited choices for what they can do, and again, it's that situation of you cannot blanket apply a limitation like the deep strike limitation, like the kind of rule of 3 limitation across the board, because there are armies and there are detachments and there are God knows how many things that could be affected negatively by that when actually they weren't causing an issue to begin with. You want people to try and make armies that are effective but thematic. I absolutely understand that, and I'm supportive of that goal. But if you're going to do that, you need to actually take into consideration what different armies have to offer the players, what different armies have to offer in terms of strategies, in terms of points cost, in terms of unit variety. I don't feel like those 2 rules specifically, the change to deep strike and the change to, and the addition of the rule of 3, I don't feel like those actually take that into account. Now, the good thing is that, much though I don't think these are the right ways to go about this, they are only beta rules. Games Workshop want you to test them. They want people to go out and play games and use these things and then get back to them and tell them what they've found. Tell them whether this works, whether it doesn't work, whether there's an issue with it, whether it causes limitations where there should be no limitations, whether it, completely kills one army or makes one army way more powerful than it has any right to be. That is something that you should absolutely do. Next time you're playing a game, use these rules. Switch up your army to accommodate these things and find out how it works. And if it fails miserably, if it doesn't work, let them know. The only way that they're going to actually get anywhere with these changes, with these rules and with these kind of evolutions of the base 8th edition rule set is if people actually do the testing. I've seen a lot of people who are just flat out going, oh well, I just won't play with these rules. Okay, I mean, I can understand that, but at the same time, you're actively making it so that if you hate them that much, Games Workshop aren't going to know why, and you are basically going out of your way to not share that experience with them. If you use them and you hate them, say why. If you use them and they're not effective, say why. Just saying, I won't bother. That's a really good and very apathetic way of getting things that you don't like to be permanent, because you never took the chance to speak out and try and do anything about it. I'm hoping that with enough testing, with enough feedback, Games Workshop will go back to this stuff and take a second look at it and try and make it a bit more, I guess, a bit more detailed, a bit more accommodating. They'll actually do it on, and I know this would be huge, kind of a huge endeavour to do rules like this on an army by army basis, but I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure that I see another way to do it. just limiting certain things and cutting off certain points where you can perform certain actions across the board kind of ignores one of the things that makes Warhammer 40k interesting to play, which is that each army is kind of different. It has different strengths, it has different weaknesses, it has different weapons and units and strategies and stratagems. And with that in mind, how do you make a blanket change to a rule that is going to accommodate all of those different facets? You can't really do it. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the three bigger talking points that I've seen come out of this FAQ, and I will link to it in the description, and there will be a couple of images that have flashed up to show you what I'm talking about at the time. What I want to know is, what do you think of it? Because there are people who think this is the best thing they've ever done, there are people that think this is the worst thing that Games Workshop has ever done, and there are people that don't seem to care. The question is, which are you? Are you on board with the changes? Do you think they work well? Have you already managed to play a couple of games testing them? And if so, what were your experiences? Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, feel free to click any of the videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that shit. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next video. Toodaloo.